September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. All month long, we are talking about taking care of your mental health, the signs to look out for, and how to seek help. Our next guest is Dr. Conti, a psychiatrist and now author of the new book, Trauma, the Invisible Epidemic. We spoke about what trauma does to our bodies and how we can heal. Dr. Conti, in your new book, you call trauma the invisible epidemic. What do you mean by that?
Trauma is everywhere around us. It affects us in so many ways, and often we don't even know it. It changes us, how we think about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves, the choices that we make, and we often don't know it, hence it being invisible to us, that unless we look for it, we don't see how it's running through our lives and how it's changing us.
And when you talk about trauma, not just like physical trauma, right? It could be from all different aspects of life?
Yes, trauma can come in all sorts of ways. Sometimes the obvious of someone being assaulted or someone close to a person dying is clearly trauma, but we can have trauma from chronic situations, such as being subject to prejudice in a chronic way, or being dismissed or denigrated in a chronic way. And we can also experience trauma from other people's suffering that can deeply impact us as much as if things had happened to ourselves.
Some of us could be feeling that maybe group trauma or something of just going through this pandemic.
Sure, absolutely. The impact of the pandemic, the impact of suffering and death that we see around us in people often that we know or care about, or just seeing it on the news and knowing this could happen to us and it could happen to people around us is frightening to us in a way that can have a very deep impact.
How have you seen from your research affecting just the way that our body works, the way that our mind works? How does it seep in and really kind of take control?
It can change our memories, meaning that it changes what we think about our memories, whether we feel good about them or whether we feel sad about them or frightened about them. And it can change our bodies from head to toe. It can change how we experience pain. It can change in ways that give us cardiovascular disease and predispose us to heart attacks or strokes. So in mind and body, trauma's impact is so pervasive that it can affect us from head to toe. And what's most amazing is it can do it without us knowing it. But if we look for it, if we look at ourselves and at the changes that may be happening in us, we can understand it and we can make ourselves healthier, even when it's had a very significant impact on us.
This being Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, we've been talking all month about ways to help ourselves and to help our loved ones as well. For those of us that, as probably most of us, have experienced some kind of trauma, what ways can we look for? What ways can we help ourselves?
The best thing we can all do is to not keep it inside, but to pick trusted others, which sometimes may be people in our lives or maybe professionals to whom we can start talking about it, because we make these sort of trauma narratives in our head that are very, very negative, and they tell us often that we're not good enough and we can't keep ourselves safe and the world isn't going to be fair to us. And if we start talking about it, we can establish what are called true life narratives, where we look at trauma through the lens of what really happened and what trauma really means and what it doesn't mean. And we can sort of write our courses in life when we may have been thrown off course by trauma.
And I've seen quite a few times just the shame that goes along with it, and people aren't willing to open up. What have you seen with shame and what role it plays in trauma and getting help?
Trauma it has a number of accomplices, and shame is sort of the worst. You could think of shame as the worst of trauma's henchmen, right? And shame comes in and tells us that trauma was our fault, or that we're cursed, or that we'll never be good enough to navigate life. So shame is really the most toxic side effect of trauma, and it furthers all these changes of trauma in us, whether it's depression or sleep problems or physical problems. It's shame that paves the way for so many of the problems that come from trauma. And it might be that the biggest one of that is that shame causes us to keep it all inside, right? To not feel comfortable talking about what's happened to us. And if shame stays secret inside of us, it festers and grows.
What do you think about the way that society has kind of changed? I mean, mental health has come to the forefront.
Yes.
The way that it's been open, people, it's more okay to talk about, but obviously we still have a long way to go.
We've made some progress with taking away the stigma of any mental health problem, including the effects of trauma, but we're not nearly where we need to be, where we can talk about it as openly as we can talk about, for example, physical health problems. And we can talk about it in a way that doesn't automatically bring a sense of shame just because we're sharing difficult things, even including in our own minds. We need to be able to talk about it, but first we need to be able to say to ourselves that, hey, something has happened, whether it was one event or it was an event that happened to us across time, or even fear inside of us across time. And there's some difference in me that I need to be able to acknowledge to myself and then get help for outside of me. And we've come a long way, but we certainly haven't come far enough.
Dr. Conti's book, Trauma, The Invisible Epidemic, is out now. Go to drpaulconti.com for more information. There's a foreword written by Lady Gaga. And we want you to remember that if you or someone you know is having suicidal thoughts, there is help. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The number is on your screen, and the center is open 24/7, 365 days a year.